Hey there nation, welcome to the show where we help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander CheapSkate, and we're back with another episode of It Came from the Sump. This is our little mini horror campaign that we're doing for our Necromunda Dominion campaign for the Sector 7 Turf War, and this is the very last episode of our It Came from the Sump battle reports. This is battle report number 39, and it is a Daemonic Possession battle report that is fought between my friends Fresh Prince Bel-Air, Brother Grimm, as well as O'Death. Fresh Prince Bel-Air is bringing the Iron Sights of House Orlock, Brother Grimm is bringing the Pelago-Slam Kings of House Goliath, and O'Death is bringing the People Eaters of the Helot Chaos Cultists. So this is a three-way battle where these three gangs will be fighting over supremacy in a typical throwdown. The difference though is in this scenario rules there are demonic spirit that is possessing fighters, and it randomly goes through all the different gangs. It's actually a pretty cool little scenario for this one. So this one's fought between my three friends. We're going to play some background music real quick. If you want to see exactly what they're bringing for this one, go ahead and pause and take a look at your own leisure. So that being said, let's get this battle report on a roll. Let's talk about the scenario rules for this one. The scenario is called Daemonic Possession. For the crews, all three crews start off with 6 different fighters for their gang. There are chosen by themselves, are the ones who actually get to personally choose their own guys, so it's a custom selection. Standard deployment rules as always. The difference though is that there is a demonic spirit that is possessing the fighters of each of the gangs. So what ends up happening is that each player rolls a d6, and the one who rolls the lowest is the one that has the demon in their gang. The demon possesses a randomly selected fighter. At the end of each end phase, the demonic possessed fighter rolls a d6. On a roll of 5 or higher, the demon manifests and takes over the fighter, and the fighter is pretty much under the insanity rules, and that's where he kind of falls over. Now, if the demon is already manifested and by the end of the turn, it jumps to the nearest fighter that's closest to him, and once again that guy also becomes subject to the insane rules. For this one, in order to exercise a demon, you have to exercise what's called an underhive exorcism, which means that you have to put a character out of action with a coup de grace. Is pretty much what you have to do on that one, alright? And once you do that, once you either put a serious injury on it or out of action result, you roll d6, and a 5 up, the demon is exercised. And if not though, if you don't exercise the demon, it actually jumps to the closest fighter as well. So pretty interesting rules on that one. At the same time, every single time the the player who controls the demon takes a fighter out of action, they score 1 victory point, and the player that exercises the demon also earns 6 victory points for their gang. The end of the battle pretty much happens when the demon is either exercised or there's no more fighters left on the table. For the wards, each of the fighters who participate earns 1 point of experience, and any fighter who is possessed by the demon and actually survives to the end of the battle report earns additional d3 experience points. And of course, if the fighter exercise the demon, they earn d6 experience points in addition to that. For reputation, the victorious gang earns d3 reputation, and any gang who of course bottled out also suffers 1 point reputation as well. And so this is taking place during an Underhive campaign. Whoever ends up winning this one gets to take a territory from the opposing gangs and add to their collection. So with the scenario rules over, let's go and talk about the battle plan real quick. Alright, so here's an overhead shot of the entirety of the battlefield. This is fought on a 4x4 table. My three friends, O'Death, Prince Bel-Air, as well as Brother Grimm, are all looking on this one. I believe O'Death is looking on the left-hand side, Brother Grimm is looking on the far side of the table, and as well as the First Prince Bel-Air is deployed as Orlocks on the right-hand side of the table. And on the near side, there's nobody deployed there right now. What the battle plan is, I'm not sure what my friends are doing for this battle plan because I'm just taking the photos in this one. I'm not really playing this. It's between my friends. I'm just assuming their plan is just to try to kill each other as quickly as possible. I do know that my friend O'Death has deployed 2 of his fighters, 2 of his champions actually. His cult disciples are armed with heavy stubbers. They're looking at the 2 highest points of the battlefield, on the top of the metro terminal there on the top of the screen, as well as the top of the Tower of Terror on the bottom right hand corner of the screen. So I guess he's put them there for some overwatching positions, but that's pretty much about the only thing I can see there. Oh, also if you look here on the bottom of the screen, you see the little silver broken tablet that's right there in the middle of the table. That represents a tunnel entrance that my friend Brother Grimm has decided to put there for his Goliaths because he has a tunneler special rule. So with the battle plan over, let's go talk about deployment real fast. So starting off with the People Eaters of the Chaos Cultists, the Helot Cultists. Over here on the left-hand side of the battlefield, there's a 4-man fire team. In the back, that is King Slender. He's the cult demagogue. He's got a mesh armor, a cult icon, a shotgun with solid and scatter slugs, a sword, and auto pistol. He's also got the devotion and inure to insanity special rules. He's also got the commanding presence as well as iron will skills. Right in front of him, directly in front of him, that is the Mangler. That is an Ambot that is armed with a tunneling claw, a grab fist, and light carapace armor. It's got the infiltrate, cranial governors, excavation, Automata, as well as valuable special rules, and it also, it's taking up the point, there's also Armor of the Grab Fist, which is pretty deadly. Next on the left-hand side, that is the Socket Head. He is a Helot Cultist, his armor flak armor, auto pistol, maul, and frag grenades. And then right next on the right-hand side, that is Half Face number 2. He's another Helot Cultist, armor flak armor, and auto pistol, as well as a maul. And using the Infiltrate special rule is Snarl, who's on the top of the Tower of Terror. He's a Cult Disciples, armed with mesh armor, a heavy stubber, and auto pistol, as well as a drop rig. He's got the Inure to Insanity, as well as the Infiltrate skill. And on the top of the Metro Terminal, on the top right-hand side of the battlefield, is Roar. He's a Cult Disciple who's armed with mesh armor, a heavy stubber with auto pistol, as well as a drop rig. He's got the Inure to Insanity, as well as the Infiltrate special rule. He's also enfeebled, so he's actually toughness 2 for his gang as well. And he's on the top of the Metro Terminal using the Infiltrate special rules in order to get there. Meanwhile, on the far right-hand side of the battlefield is deployment for the Iron Sights. This is Fresh Prince Bel-Air's gang. First off, he's got a little 3-man fire team. Up in the front, that is Johnny the Boy. Johnny the Boy is also the guy who ended up getting possessed on this one. So he has a demonic spirit inside of his meat suit, just kind of hibernating until it eventually pops out and, hurts people. Next on the left-hand side, that is Red Eye. That is a gang who's armed with mesh armor. He's got a grenade launcher with frag, as well as crack grenades. He's also packing a stub gun. And then right next on the right-hand side, that is a Knight Rider. That is a gang champion. He's armed with mesh armor, a heavy stubber, as well as auto pistol. He's also equipped with the drop rig. He's got the connected skill, as well as suffering from a head injury. And that pretty much makes the deployment here on the left-hand side of the Iron Sights. And on the right-hand side of the deployment is another 3-man fire team. Up front, that is Doc Dealgood. He is a Lugger Servitor. He's got heavy carapace armor, a Servitor close combat weapon, as well as a heavy stubber and monosight. He's got the weapon platform, as well as the ammo hoppers special rule. Right next to him in the back on the left, that is the Toad Cutter. That is the leader of the Iron Sights. He's got mesh armor, a bolt gun, and maul. He's got the commanding presence, true grit skills. He's also suffering from a hobbling, as well as a spinal injury. And right next to him on the right-hand side, that is Starbuck, who's a ganger. He's armed with mesh armor, an auto gun with frag grenades, a maul, and he's also got the hobbled injury as well. And that pretty much makes up the Iron Sights for this one. And following on the far side of the board is another 3-man deployment for the Pelago-Slam Kings. On the left-hand side, that is Grizz. He's a gang champion. He's equipped with Furnace Plate. He's got a heavy stubber and stub gun with suspensors on his heavy stubber. He's got the Nerves of Steel skill as well. Next to him, to the right-hand side, that is Blitzkrieg Bob. That is the leader of the Pelago-Slam Kings. He's got a Furnace Plate. He's got a grenade launcher, frag and crack grenades, a Brute Cleaver. He's also got the commanding presence, as well as the Overseer skill. And then right next on the right-hand side, that is Flesh Stick. He's a ganger. He's got a Furnace Plate. He's also armed with a Renderizer, a stub gun with Dum-Dum bullets. He's also got incendiary charges, as well as a stem slug stash. And that makes it the deployment here for the Pelago-Slam Kings. And on the near side of the table, that little broken piece of metal right there in the center of the near side of the table, that is the tunnel entrance that the Goliaths are planning on using. The Pelago-Slam Kings have a tunnel territory, which means that at the beginning of each priority phase, they roll a d6 on a 4-up. However many fighters he has, up to 3, can deploy right next to that tunnel and be group activated as well. And the 3 fighters he's using for that one. First of all, that is Grushka. He is a Berserker. He's got Furnace Plate. He's got a Mutated Fist with Bone Spurs, as well as a Stem Slug Stash. He's got the Combat Drugs, as well as the Impetuous skill. Next from the right-hand side, that is Craze. He's a gang who's armed with Furnace Plate. He's got a Stub Cannon, Incendiary Charges, as well as a Spudjacker. And right next on the right-hand side, that is Stinkum. Stinkum is a Juvie who's armed with Furnace Plate, a Stub Gun, as well as a Maw. And that pretty much makes up the deployment for all 3 gangs. So with deployment over with, we go directly to the top of turn number 1, and my friends roll off for priority to see who'll be going first. So the top of turn number 1 goes directly to the Goliath, so because of that, the Pelago-Slam Kings will go first, and for his very first activation, Brother Grimm decides to activate Grizz. He actually spends a basic action to take aim with his bolt, his heavy stubber, so that way he gets +1 to hit, and he spends another basic action opening up with his heavy stubber because it has suspensors, so firing that weapon is a basic action. At the same time, manages to get 2 shots off. He also manages to wound Socket Head, so he goes down with the wound. He's also suffering from a flesh wound, so he's currently pinned. And he also manages to hit the Ambot the Mangler as well. Manages to take a wound off of him, and also managed to pin him as well. So pretty successful opening shots for the Pelago-Slam Kings. Up next is Fresh Prince Bel-Air, who then activates his gang leader, the Toe Cutter, who does a group activation with Doc Dealgood as well as Starbuck. Basically, they just move forward, doing double movements, moving upward is what they end up doing for Starbuck anyway. Starbuck climbs up to the roof of the 2-story shanty that's right there on the near side of the table. At the same time, both Doc Dealgood as well as the Toe Cutter move up a basic movement, a simple movement action, so move up the normal movement allowance, and they spend another action to open fire with their weapons. And Doc Dealgood is able to fire his heavy stubber as a basic action because he is a weapons platform. So the closest target to them in line of sight happens to be Grizz, and I believe it was the Toe Cutter who manages to hit him, but unfortunately for Fresh Prince Bel-Air, he is unable to wound Grizz, so because of it, he just pinned. At the same time, when it comes to Doc Dealgood's turn to open fire with this Heavy Stubber, he just kind of flubs his rolls, so he doesn't hit anything, he completely misses all of his shots. So with that activation over with, we go directly to my friend O'Death. He decides to activate Roar first as one of his disciples. He tries to take open fire with his Heavy Stubber directly into the Pelago-Slam Kings. He opened fire directly towards, what's his name, Blitzkrieg Bob, as well as Fleshstick, because they're the closest targets to him. He has line of sight to. Unfortunate for him, though, he fails his rolls, so nothing much really actually happens. He doesn't even hit them. He just kind of misses all of his shots. So with that activation, we jump back to the Pelago-Slam Kings. Brother Grimm goes next. He does a group activation with his leader, Blitzkrieg Bob, who also activates Fleshstick. So what ends up happening is that Blitzkrieg Bob does a double movement over to the right-hand side, manages to take cover next to that Gun March Shanty there on the right-hand side. At the same time, Fleshstick moves up his normal simple movement allowance up to the corner there, the corner office building, and then he throws a incendiary charge directly at Doc Dealgood. The throwing Molotov is a good hit and lands directly on Doc Dealgood and explodes in a 5-inch blast radius, which hits both Doc Dealgood as well as the Toe Cutter as well, giving him a Strength 3 incendiary blazing attack directly onto those guys as well. Brother Grimm has actually put a wound off on the Toe Cutter, so because of that, that leader is now halfway dead and he is currently pinned. Unfortunately, he doesn't catch on fire, so because of that, he's just laying down on the ground being pinned currently. However, Doc Dealgood, though, suffers the blaze injury as well. Also suffers a wound at the same time, and he flees back 10 inches right behind the Metro Terminal, and he's currently on fire, which is actually kind of rough for my friend Fresh Prince Bel-Air. Meanwhile, across the table, Fresh Prince Bel-Air does a group activation with a Knight Rider who also activates Red Eye. The two of them actually do a double movement to climbing up to the top of the catwalk, heading up to the first level of that catwalk, making their way towards the top of the Tower of Terror, it looks like. And while this is occurring, we go back to the People Eaters, so O'Death decides to activate Snarl next. Snarl does open fire with his Heavy Stubber directly into, I believe it was Fleshstick, who's all the way across the other side of the battlefield. But unfortunately for him, though, he does miss his shot. He doesn't have suspensors on his Heavy Stubber, so every firing of that Heavy Stubber is kind of like a double action for him. So because of that, he doesn't get any bonuses for shooting, which is really what helped him, because when you fire a Heavy Stubber at long range, it's -1 to hit, which is really, really rough. So with Brother Grimm's, all of his activations are certainly done for this turn, so the jump goes right back to Fresh Prince Bel-Air. Fresh Prince Bel-Air then activates Johnny the Boy, who's also got the Daemonic Possession on him. He actually spends a double movement to climb to the top of the catwalks to join up with the Knight Rider as well as Red Eye. And for his final act, O'Death decides to do a group activation with King Slender, who then also activates Half Face, Socket Head, as well as the Mangler. The Mangler, as well as King Slender, I believe... no, sorry, they don't take double movements. I'm sorry, they both move up their normal movement allowance, just a normal movement for them, because they both open fire with the Grab Fist, as well as a Solid Slug directly into Blitzkrieg Bob. At the same time, Socket Head, as well as Half Face number 2, they both do a double movement, moving over to the Shanty there on the left-hand side, taking cover. Unfortunately for O'Death, the Grab Fist, the opening up of the Grab Cannon, actually missed his shot, so nothing much really happens from there. However, it was actually the Solid Slug shot that managed to hit Blitzkrieg Bob. Unfortunately for O'Death, though, the Solid Slug doesn't do anything against him, it just manages to hit him is all it does, it fails to wound, so because of that, Blitzkrieg Bob is currently pinned. And with that being said, that pretty much ends turn number 1 for this one. And at the end of turn number 1, no Demonic Possession takes place yet. Fresh Prince Bel-Air was a D6 to see if the Daemon manifests itself within Johnny the Boy, and everything is perfectly fine, so nothing to worry about there. And since there is no injuries or rallies or routes, there's no reason why they'd continue on with the end phase, and that pretty much ends turn number 1. So here's an overhead shot of the entirety of the end of turn number 1, the entirety of the battlefield. As you can see, the Pelago-Slam Kings are starting to come down from the top of the table, moving down directly towards the center. At the same time, the People Eaters are maneuvering to intercept the Goliaths at the same time, fighting that. You relying on their two cult disciples on the top of the 2 towers there to lay down covering fire. At the same time, the Ironsides are starting to put their assault right there on the right-hand side by climbing up the catwalks, looking like he's trying to go towards the Tower of Terror, as well as the Metro Terminal to take on those 2 cult disciples, while at the same time his assault there at the top of the table is kind of petering out because Doc Dealgood's currently on fire and his leader's currently pinned. So with the end of turn number 1, we go directly to the top of turn number 2, and my friends roll off for priority to see who goes first. Alright, so we got directly to the top of turn number 2, and once again, the Helot Chaos Cult managed to get the initiative on this one, so they'll be going first. So the first thing they actually end up doing is, once again, does a group activation. Activates King Slender, who does a group activation with the Mangler, as well as with Socket Head, as well as Half Face number 2. Half Face number 2 and Socket Head both do a double movement to climb to the top of that shanty, so they're right there in the middle of the roof. At the same time, the Mangler, as well as King Slender, just move up their normal moon allowance, so that way they can open fire with their long-range weapons, respectively. Unfortunate for them, though, they missed. So because of that, the next group activation happens with Brother Grimm. Brother Grimm does a group activation with Blitzkrieg Bob, who also does a group activation with Grizz. And because that both those guys open fire with their weapons, Blitzkrieg Bob opens up with a crack grenade from his grenade launcher, and Grizz opens up with his heavy stubber. So in the end, it all pretty much worked out. What ended up happening is that King Slender got taken out by Grizz, who went out cold for his out-of-action result, and unfortunately for him, he also ended up getting captured by the Pelago-Slam Kings, which is actually kind of cool because this is actually the very first miniature in our entire campaign that's actually been captured. We've actually been kind of lucky for the most part. No one's really had to fail that capture roll for the most part, so because of that, not to really worry about that. So this is the very first time a fighter's been captured, which is pretty neat. So because of that, King Slender now belongs to the Pelago-Slam Kings, and the people leaders will need to go back and rescue him. At the same time, Blitzkrieg Bob does open up onto the Mangler, managed to put 2 wounds on that guy. So now the Mangler is carrying 3 wounds out of the 4 that he's carrying, and things are not looking very good for the people leaders at this point. So up next is Fresh Prince Bel-Air. For his very first activation, he activates the Toe Cutter, who actually does a movement falling backwards to head towards the Doc Dealgood. I think he did that so that way he can kind of help put out the flames on Doc Dealgood as well, because that cargo servitor is packing a lot of firepower for his gang. So we jump back across the table to Roar, who's on the top of the Metro Terminal. He opens fire with his heavy stubber, firing all 3 of his shots directly into Fleshstick. And luckily for Brother Grimm, Fleshstick actually just gets pinned for the most part. He does get hit 3 times with that heavy stubber from Roar, but unfortunately for my buddy O'Death, when he went to roll to wound, he rolled 3 ones. So because of that, nothing much really happened from that one. So because of that, Fleshstick does go down laying face up, and he's just currently taking cover because he's getting shot at with a heavy machine gun. And at the same time, finally the 3 other fighters for the Pelago-Slam King, Grushka, Craze, as well as Stinkum, all 3 of those guys kind of come right through the tunnel, and so because of that, my friend Brother Grimm decides to activate these guys next in a one-time group activation for all 3 fighters. So Brother Grimm decides to send up Grushka as well as Stinkum. They both do a double movement to climb to the top of the walkway, heading their way to the Tower of Terror. And at the same time, Craze actually does a basic movement forward, moving up 5 inches, so that way he could fire with his stub cannon directly into the Knight Rider. Unfortunately for him, though, he does miss his shots, so nothing much really happens from there. In response, Fresh Prince Bel-Air decides to activate the Knight Rider. It is a group activation with Red Eye. Both those guys open up. Red Eye takes his basic action aim with his grenade launcher and fires his crack grenade directly into Grushka, but unfortunately for him, though, he missed his shot, so the grenade kind of lands wide and nothing much happens from there. At the same time, the same thing ends up happening with the Knight Rider. He actually gets a roll and 1 additional shot from the firepower dice, but unfortunately for him, both of his shots missed as well, so not much is really happening for the iron sights. While this is occurring, Snarl tries to open fire with his heavy stubber directly into Grushka, who's down below, but unfortunately for him, though, he misses his shot. And to add insult to injury, he also rolls an out of ammo result for that. So because he fails his ammo check, so he'll need to spend a basic action to reload his weapons. So things not looking very good for this character up here on the top of the Tower of Terror. So jumping back to Fresh Prince Bel-Air, he decides to try to put out the flames on Doc Dealgood, but unfortunately for him, though, he fails to put out the flames, so because of that, Doc Dealgood starts running again. I think he runs 7 inches to the left-hand side, and he is currently fleeing, and he's still on fire, which is pretty bad for that cargo servitor. And for the last activation of the turn, Brother Grimm decides to activate Fleshstick, who gets back on his feet again for a basic action. Then he spends another simple action to move across the table, heading towards Grizz in order to help some support him that way. And that pretty much makes up the action phase for this one. At the end of turn number 2, no Daemonic Possession is taking place at this point, so nothing's going on there. I forgot to mention this earlier, but Johnny the Boy also did a double action to climb to the top of the catwalk as well. So now he's on the 3rd level of the Tower of Terror, and no demon action yet. So things are looking pretty not so great for the Iron Sights on this one. Alright, so that takes directly to the end of turn number 2, and as you can see here, not much action is really happening for the most part. There's no demonic movement yet. The Pelago-Slam Kings are still dealing with the Chaos Cultists on the top of the screen. At the same time, the Pelago-Slam Kings are sending their heavy fighters along the bottom of the screen there, heading directly towards the Tower of Terror to intercept both the Orlocks as well as the Chaos Cultists. At the same time, the Chaos Cultists are controlling the high ground with long-range fire, but unfortunately for them though, they're just kind of failing to hit things, so not much action is taking place with this one so far. So with the end of turn number 2, that takes directly to the top of turn number 3, and my friends will offer a priority to see who goes first. Alright, so that takes us directly to the top at turn number 3, and the Goliaths go first. The Pelago-Slam Kings get priority on this one. And the first thing he does, he activates his leader, Blitzkrieg Bob, who decides to pop the Overseer ability, which is a double action. What it does is that you actually choose a fighter within 12 inches of the leader, and what ends up happening is that that fighter that's chosen actually has 2 rows of activations back to back. And that's exactly what he did. For his very first set of actions, he had, Flesh Stick do a double movement to go right behind Blitzkrieg Bob, and then for his second set of actions, he has him do a double action by charging directly into the Mangler. So because of that, the Mangler gets back on his feet again. He is currently in close combat with Fleshstick, who is packing a Renderizer. So that'll be kind of interesting to see exactly how this goes. And in the end, oh my goodness, in the end, Fleshstick managed to take out the Mangler, and by giving him an enfeebling injury. Now, because the Book of Ruin has just come out for Necromunda, there are mutation special rules for Chaos Helot Cultists, which means that every single time you suffer a lusting injury, what you do is you roll a d6 and you add +1 to it, and if your score is 6 or higher, you don't suffer an injury per se, you get a mutation instead, in which case the Mangler does go out of action, but he suffers what's called the Twisted Flesh mutation, which means that he actually gets to roll a d6, not a d6, I'm sorry, he gets to remove flesh wounds every round, every single time he's activated as well, which is pretty deadly because the Mangler is a close combat monster. Now, the penalty, of course, is that he can't get any benefit from Medicaid kits or from any kind of road docs, or at the same time get any assistance from recovery tests. But at the same time, though, this thing is super deadly as well. So with that being said, the aimbot goes directly out of action, and nets another experience point for Fleshstick. We then jumped across the table for Fresh Prince Bel-Air, who actually activates Giant the Boy, who does a double movements in order to get around the other far side of the Tower of Terror. So he's on the 3rd level, just below where Snarl is located at, but he's just kind of taking cover there in the middle of the tower, getting ready for his next series of actions. So Death didn't activate Nest, he activates Roar, his cult disciple, who opens fire with his heavy stepper directly into Grushka, which is actually the closest target that's in line of sight for him as well. He does manage to get off an additional shot with his heavy stepper, unfortunately for him though he also rolled an ammo check, so because of that he does fail his ammo check, so he'll need to spend another basic action next turn reloading his weapon. To make matters worse, Roar does manage to hit Grushka, but unfortunately for him though it doesn't cause any injuries, he just managed to pin the big guy, so that's really about it for the most part. So with that, Brother Grimm goes next with his activations, and he decides to activate Grushka, who actually does a basic action to get back on his feet again, and does another simple action to climb up to the top of the 3rd floor of the Tower of Terror. He's currently facing down Johnny the Boy, this huge steroid monster, getting ready to charge directly into that poor Juvie, who is currently possessed by a demon. Meanwhile, across the table, Fresh Prince Bel-Air then activates Starbuck, who does a double movement to move across the catwalk directly into the 2nd floor of the Metro Terminal. So with that, we go ahead and jump across the table again back to Death, who does a group activation using the Favor of Slanesh ability that he had from his previous Dark Ritual, which means you get to activate 2 fighters in a group activation. He activates both Half-Face number 2 as well as Socket, who do a simple movement to move to the edge of the shanty, and they do a basic action, open fire with their auto pistols directly into Grizz. They both manage to hit Grizz as well as wound him, but unfortunately though, they end up with 2 flesh wound results. So because of that, Grizz is currently pinned with 2 flesh wounds. Now granted, he is toughness 2, which makes him easier to injure, but at the same time though, Grizz can still fight, he can still shoot, and Goliaths don't know the meaning of quit, so that part's pretty crazy. Brother Grimm then activates Stanko, who does a double movement in order to get to the 3rd floor of the Tower of Terror as well, backing up Grushka and again watching his back for the other members of the Ironsides who might be coming up behind him. Meanwhile, on the top of the battlefield, my friend Fresh Prince Bel-Air then decides to activate the Toe Cutter, who does a double movement to move up to the 2nd floor of the Metro Terminal right next to Starbuck. So because those 2 guys are now palling around together, trying to catch up to their enemies. Up next, my friend decides to activate Snarl, who actually spends a double basic action to try to reload his gun. He fails his first ammo check, and so because he does another action in order to try to clear the weapon and to reload it again, and that time he is currently successful. So because of that, he does finally move the ammo check off of him. So for Brother Grimm's last activation, he does activate Grizz, who gets back on his feet again with a basic action and spends another basic action, open fire with his heavy stubber directly into socket head as well as half face number 2. But unfortunately for him though, he misses his one shot that he gets, so not much really happens from there. And at the same time, for the last of the activations, Fresh Prince Bel-Air then activates the Knight Rider, who also activates, Red Eye as well. Both those guys spend a basic action to get back on the top, a simple action rather, to climb up to the 3rd floor of the catwalk that's between the Tower of Terror as well as the Metro Terminal. Because the Knight Rider has already done a normal action, he can't fire his heavy stubber. So what he decides to do is to take aim with his auto pistol and open fire directly into the back of Stinkum. And at the same time when that takes place, he then plans on shooting with the grenade launcher from Red Eye using a crack grenade. Needless to say, the Knight Rider has no problem actually hitting Stinkum as well. Managed to put a flesh wound on that guy, so because of that he is now toughness 2 and he's currently pinned. And because that guy went down, the next closest target for Red Eye happens to be Grushka. So he opens fire with his grenade launcher, firing a crack grenade directly into, into Grushka. Managed to put 2 wounds on that guy as well. And not to mention that, Grushka failed his initiative check, so then he falls down to the next level right below him. And to make matters worse, he does suffer another injury, and he gets an out cold result as a result of that. So because that Grushka goes off the table, and his participation in his battle report is now officially over. And that part's pretty crazy because that Zerker was pretty deadly in close combat, but now he can't participate now for the rest of the battle. So for Brother Grimm's very last action, he decides to activate Craze, who actually spends a simple action move up to the top of the catwalk. He also takes a basic action, open up with the stub cannon directly into Red Eye, but unfortunately for him though, his shot goes wide and he misses, so nothing much happens from there. And for his last activation, Fresh Prince Bel-Air activates Doc Dealgood, who does manage to put out the flames on himself, so now he can stop worrying about running around like a chicken with his head cut off because he's no longer on fire. So with that takes directly to the end phase, and then finally the demon does come out to play, and now the demon is manifested directly into Johnny the Boy. So starting for the next turn, that guy will start be doing all this demonic goodness as well. And unfortunately for the people eaters, they do take a bottle out test result, and unfortunately for Odeth, he does fail that result as well. So because of that, in the next turn before he activates fighters, Odeth will need to take cool checks to see if his fighters actually stay on the table, or whether they decide to flee and to escape as quickly as possible. And on that note, that takes directly to the end of turn number 3, and here's an overhead shot of the entirety of the battlefield. As you can see, there's a lot of action taking place here on the near side of the table with Pelago-Slam Kings, Iron Sights, as well as Chaos Cultists. We're fighting right next to the Tower of Terror as well. At the same time, there's also a lot of action taking place at the top of the table between the Pelago-Slam Kings as well as the Chaos Cultists as well. And the Iron Sights are just trying to manage to survive between the Metro Terminal as well as the Catwalk between the Metro Terminal as well as the Tower of Terror. So that being said, we go directly to the top of turn number 4. My friends roll off for priority to see who will be going first. Alright, so that takes us directly to the top of turn number 4, and the Pelago-Slam Kings get the priority once again, and for his very first activation, Brother Grimm activates Craze. Craze takes a basic action, take aim with his stub cannon, getting him a +1 to hit, and he does another basic action, open fire with that stub cannon directly into the Knight Rider. Unfortunately for him, though, he does miss his shot, so nothing much really happens there. Up next, Fresh Prince Bel-Air decides to go next. He does a group activation with the Toe Cutter, who also activates Starbuck, and both those guys do a double movement to get to the very top of the Metro Terminal, and they're right staring down the back of Roar, the cult disciple from the People Eaters. So Odeth decides to go next, and he decides to do a bottle test real quick with his 2 fighters, Half Face as well as Sockhead. Unfortunately for both those guys fail their cool check, so they both decide to run away from the battlefield. So 2 fighters are now off the table for the People Eaters. So because those fighters fled, he decides to activate Snarl instead, who then takes a turn to open fire with his heavy stubber directly across the battlefield towards the Toe Cutter as well as Starbuck, who's on the other end of the battlefield on top of the Metro Terminal. Unfortunately for him though, because he's firing at long range, he does suffer -1 to hit and he fails his roll. So because of that, nothing much really happens for his shooting activation. Brother Grimm goes next, and the first thing he does, he actually double activates, Stinkum, who actually just spends a double action climbing up to the very top of the tower there, the Tower of Terror, onto the 3rd floor, and also kind of goes right in the middle there to kind of take cover so that way he doesn't get shot at by the Iron Sights that are slowly surrounding him. Meanwhile, Fresh Prince Bel-Air then activates Doc Dealgood, who does a double movement climbing up to the 2nd floor of the catwalk. And if you're wondering how does a giant half-man, half-tractor thing do that, all I have to say is the power of imagination. That's pretty much what I gotta say for that. And so because of that, Doc Dealgood ends up there somehow, some way. So Brother Grimm goes next. He then activates Blitzkrieg Bob, who does a group activation with Flesh Stick, and both those fighters actually spend a double movement, moving across the battlefield as quick as they can, past the triangular tower, heading towards the other side of the battlefield because they're way out of position and they got a lot of ground to cover in order to help out the rest of their brothers who are fighting against the Iron Sights. So up next, the Iron Sights do get activated next. The Knight Rider does a group activation real quick. He does an activation for himself as well as for Red Eye. Red Eye does a double movement up to the top of the sorry, not a double movement, he does a simple movement rather, onto the to the top floor of the Tower of Terror, so that way he's staring down the barrel directly into Snarl. At the same time, the Knight Rider turns around and opens fire this heavy stubber directly into Roar, who's across the table up on the top of the Metro Terminal. So he does manage to hit Roar, but unfortunately for him, doesn't fail to wound him. He fails to wound him, unfortunately. But Roar fails his initiative test and goes plummeting down to the earth and suffers 3 damage from the 10-inch fall they took from the top of the Metro Terminal down on the ground. Suffers a grievous injury as a result of that, so because of that, Roar is no longer participating in the rest of this battle report. So with that, we jump directly across the table to Grizz. Grizz does a double movement, moving correctly as he can across the battlefield towards that shanty there, taking cover from any long-range fire. And then Johnny the Boy gets activated next, and since he suffers from the Insanity table, what you do is you roll a d6 and you consult the Insanity table to see exactly what happens to him. On a roll of 1, he flees. On a roll of 2 to 5, he's basically under the control of an opposing player, and if he rolls a 6, he just activates as normal. Unfortunately for Fresh Prince Bel-Air, he does fall into the control of Brother Grimm, so Brother Grimm gets to use Johnny any way he wants. He ends up actually doing a simple action movement to the top of the roof of the Tower of Terror, and he also does another simple action for him to activate, basic action rather, for him to activate his psychic ability, which is basically like this psychic vomit ability. That's a template attack, and he launches that attack directly against Snarl. So Johnny the Boy does hit him with that psychic vomit ability and doesn't actually cause any wounds, but what he does do though is set him on fire because he's got the blazes effect on it, and when he rolls to see exactly what happens to him, Snarl does catch on fire. And unfortunate for him, when my friend O'Death had a roll to see exactly what ended up happening to this guy, he ended up rolling like an 8, and the random arrow showed him running off the building. So he jumps off the top of the Tower of Terror, comes crashing like a meteor straight down the ground, and suffers 3 injury as a result of that. 2 of them are flesh wounds, the last one was an out cold result because he went directly out of action. So just like that, all the Chaos Cultists from the People Leaders have been killed off the table at this point. So that takes directly to the end phase, and the demon switches meat suits, jumping out of Johnny the Boy's body in a giant wisp of black smoke and goes directly into Red Eye. So now Red Eye is currently possessed by the demon. So with that, takes directly to the end of turn number 4, and here's an overhead shot of the entirety of the battlefield. As you can see, the Chaos Cultists are no longer on the table anymore. They've either fled or they've been killed, and so they're completely gone now off the battlefield. The only 2 gangs that are left are the Pelago-Slam Kings as well as the Iron Sights. The Iron Sights are currently controlling the high ground by controlling the Metro Terminal, the Catwalk, as well as the Tower of Terror, and the Pelago-Slam Kings are trying to continue their assault to the top of those towers and at the same time trying to close the distance in order to engage the Orlocks. So that being said, that takes directly to the end of turn number 4 and directly to the top of turn number 5, and my friends roll off our priority to see who goes first. So that takes directly to the top of turn number 5, and the Iron Sights get to go first for once. It only took them 4 turns, so because of that, Fresh Prince Bel-Air decides to activate Johnny the Boy, and Johnny the Boy does a double action to tear across the Tower of Terror and charge directly into his brother-in-arms Red Eye, and actually engages him in close combat. He's got 2 weapons, so it gives him a +1 attack, plus he charge giving him 3 attacks total. He decides to use all 3 of his attacks on his Maul. And at the same time, not only does he manage to put him out of action, he also gives him a lessons learned injury as well, earning him 2 additional experience points. So Red Eye does go out of action, which is kind of sad for him, and he does go to recovery, but he has no lasting injuries. In fact, he gets the lessons learned ability off instead, earning him 2 experience points as well. And at the same time, because he did that to him, finish him off with that Maul and put him out of action, we roll off to see exactly if the Underhive Exorcism worked, and it did. And just like that, the demon has been exorcised off the battlefield. And with that, takes us directly to end the game with a victory for the Orlocks, who did a little bit of fratricide in order to make sure that they could heal a demon and to save their gang at the same time. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that pretty much wraps up this battle report. We're going directly to the post game because this battle report is now officially over. Alright, so we first start off with the People Leaders. Further injuries, they actually suffered 4 injuries. King Slender got an out cold result, but unfortunate for him though, he got captured by the Pelago-Slam Kings. So because of that, he's being held for ransom by the Pelago-Slam Kings, and we get to do our very first rescue mission battle report later on this round, which is pretty exciting because so far everyone's been avoiding capture up to this point. Unfortunately, it's for King Slender, who's also the leader of the lowest ranking gang in the campaign, but still, All exciting stuff, all things considered. At the same time, Roar suffered a grievous injury while Snarl suffered an out cold result, and just like we said before, the Mangler, instead of suffering an enfeebling injury, he gets the Twisted Flesh mutation, which allows him to remove 1 flesh wound each activation, but he can't benefit from bio boosters, Medicaid kits, or assistance on injury rolls. But at the same time though, you know, it's a Ambot, so what are you going to do about it? For advancements, what ended up happening is that Hoodie, he didn't participate in this battle report, but he did level up to level 3, earning +1 to his movement. And the reason why Hoodie leveled up is because he was chosen for the Dark Ritual from the post-game action sequence. Half-Face number 2, he leveled up to level 3, earning +1 to his weapon skill, and Sockhead leveled up to level 2, earning +1 to his movement. From their territories, from their settlement, they earned 1 point reputation as well as 60 credits, and they also decided to do the Dark Ritual. They offered up Hoodie as sacrifice, and the Dark Ritual went off without a hitch. Hoodie gained 6 experience points by doing the Dark Ritual, and once again, the People Eaters have dedicated themselves to Slaanesh, so that way during once per round they can do a group activation with 2 fighters at the same time. So things are kudos for the People Eaters at this point. During the Merchant phase, they had 60 credits from their territory as well as 35 credits from their stash, giving a grand total of 95 credits in total. With their credits, they purchased 3 sets of frag grenades for Gazer, the Nerf Herder, as well as Half-Face number 2, and they placed the remaining 5 credits back into their stash. From the reputation, they earned 1 point reputation from their settlement, as well as 1 point for fighting against the Pelago-Slam Kings for the very first time. However, since they failed their bottle test, they lost that additional reputation. That brings their grand total to 16 points of reputation. Their new record now is at 2 wins as well as 4 losses, and the new gang rating now is at 2,345 points. Up next, we have the Pelago-Slam Kings, and they only actually suffered 1 injury in the entire battle report, and that was Grushka, who suffered an out-cold result, so he is perfectly fine. For advancements, none of the members of the Pelago-Slam Kings advanced this round, and from their territories, from their settlement, they got 1 point reputation as well as 40 credits. As for their tunnels, they did lose their tunnels to the Iron Sight, so because of that, they're no longer controlling 3 territories, they're only controlling 2. During the Merchant phase, they earned 40 credits from their territories, as well as 30 credits from their stash, bringing their grand total to 70 credits in total. With those 70 credits, they purchased 2 sets of frag grenades for Porter as well as Gage, and they also purchased Dum-Dum rounds for Stinkum and Porter, so that way their stub guns are now at strength 4. And at the same time, they also captured King Slender, who is the leader of the People Eaters, and they're currently holding him for ransom, and the People Eaters decided to do a rescue mission, which we'll do later on this turn of the campaign, so that we can see exactly how that all works out for them. From their reputation, they earned 1 point of reputation from their settlement, but they also earned 2 points reputation, 1 for fighting against the Iron Sights for the very first time, and another point for fighting against the People Eaters for the very first time, bringing the grand total to 27 points reputation. Their new record now is at 3 wins as well as 4 losses, and the new gang rating is at 1,990 points. And finally, we have the victors of this scenario, the Iron Sights. For the injuries, they only suffered 1 injury, which was Red Eye. He suffered a Lessons Learned injury, so he does go to recovery, but he earns 2 additional points of experience, which is pretty cool. For advancements, the Knight Rider leveled up to level 4, earning +1 to his Ballistic skill. At the same time, Johnny the Boy leveled up 2 times, all the way up to level 4, earning +1 to his Toughness and +1 to his Cool as well. For their territories, they got a settlement. For their territory, they earned 1 point of reputation as well as 30 credits, and they managed to capture tunnels from the Pelago-Slam Kings, which gives the Orlocks an enhanced boon because the tunnels belong to them now, giving them an additional point of reputation. At the same time, they can now do a special deployment where they can have 2 tunnel entrances now, and they could deploy up to 6 fighters through those tunnels as well, which is pretty good for them. In the Merchant phase, they actually earned 30 credits from the scenario from their settlement, and they decided to take all 30 credits and put it directly into their stash. From the reputation, they earned 3 points reputation from winning the scenario, as well as 2 points reputation from their territories, and they also earned a point of reputation for fighting against the Pelago-Slam Kings for the very first time, giving them a grand total of 30 points of reputation. Their new record now is at 3 wins and 7 losses, and their new gang rating now is at 2,025 points. So that's going to do it for this one, you guys. This wraps up our little mini campaign. It came from the Sump for our round 7 of our Sector 7 Turf Wars. Kind of nice having this little horror-themed series of scenarios with multiplayers, thanks to the Book of Ruin. So I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as we did. Had a good time filming it as well as playing it. That's going to do it for this one, you guys. As always, please feel free to like, comment, and or subscribe. Your guys' input is invaluable to us as always. Also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, as well as blogger.com for all the latest, greatest hobby news relating to this channel. That's going to do it for this one, you guys. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out and stay classy.